All right, Paul, you ready?
Yes, I am.
All right, let's go. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. So, today we're going to return to a theme we spent an entire series on in the past: remote work. Uh,
Yeah.
so, now, before you switch off, we're going to look at it from a different angle. What we know factually, but also people are coping or not coping with coming back to the office, probably worth 10 minutes of your time. So, you ready, Paul?
Yeah. There
Let's,
is a lot to get through, but I think we can do it in 10 minutes.
so, is remote work the greatest invention since sliced bread or the end of society as we know it? LinkedIn tells us both things are true.
Yeah, it's funny that, and social media is a bit like that. Never doesn't really do nuance well, does it? Social media.
No, no. Your feed is
Yeah,
tailored to make you think what you already think. Sometimes it seems.
yeah. I think I would argue it's neither, as you might expect.
Yeah, neither. Okay, let's hear about it.
All right. Well, I mean, I think the first thing that it's important to remember is remote work's been around forever. I mean, it just became a big thing around the pandemic time. But I'll use myself as an example. I've been in the workplace since 1994. Yeah, 1994, and I think I've only spent about maybe 2% of that time in a formal office. And this is being recorded from my home. The vast majority of my work has been done there in hotels, in conferences, etc. And I've had a career that's involved working in probably, I don't know, 7 or 8 companies, maybe 10 in that period of time. And I've been able to do remote work for that entire period of time. And my experience has not been unique, right?
Hmm.
Remote work is basically just a type of work that a relatively small percentage of the population were doing. And then during the pandemic, a lot of people were doing it. As to whether it's good or bad, it really depends on how it's done and how well people are doing it, whether they're trained to do it, and whether the managers that manage them have the skills to manage in that type of environment.
Yeah, yeah. If I really think about it, I'm probably about officially, formally, like 12 years of remote work
Mm-hmm.
prior to the pandemic, and although it wasn't an exception for sure, um, it's one of those things we didn't think about the fact that we were building this skill that would come in handy, I guess.
Yeah.
Uh, so let's get some examples of ways it might help or hurt people.
Yeah. So to be clear, right, everything I'm going to say here is based on patterns, right? Not everybody's going to have the
Sure.
same experience. YMMV, as they say. But let's start with the helping part. So definitely the lack of commute is a lot of help to a lot of people.
Hmm.
It gives people more time, often an hour a day or more. If you live, I know, you live in LA, often more in that kind of area,
Yeah.
and that's free time, right? The
Yeah.
number one way in which it's used, the data clearly shows at this point, is more sleep, and we are a sleep deprived nation,
Hmm.
so it helps with that. Um, we'll talk about that more in another episode. The whole issue with sleep and rest
Hmm.
and so on. Number two way it's used is more exercise, and that's also great, right? But it does hurt in other related ways. I'll give you one example that was a Stanford study that was conducted around about the pandemic, but then has been revisited since. We are sitting at our desks more often when we're working from home. In many cases, a lot more, right?
Hmm.
On average, people are sitting that are working from home are sitting about an hour or more
Interesting.
than they were in the office, right? That's as we skip things like running to physical meetings or
Yeah.
just walking from the parking lot to our to our place, or going grabbing something from the water, doing the water cooler stuff, all that
Yeah.
kind of thing, right? And so we're skipping all of that. That means that we are more sedentary when we're not doing the exercise stuff, etc. We're generally more lonely, and that can have a significant effect on our physical and our mental health. So it
Hmm.
is not all good, no matter what anybody tells you, right? There are differences, and those differences have to be managed.
Hmm. Yeah, man, we were sedentary already.
Yeah, yeah,
When you say that, I'm like, oh, you're so right. Just thinking about, because I had a brief period where I was working from home, and then I joined a new company before the pandemic, and I was in the office for like a month and a half, and then the
Yeah.
pandemic hit and we were back out. And it was kind of shocking to be in the office after not being in an office for so long. But yeah, you're constantly moving. And interesting. So, what about the stuff the leaders talk about, or complain about, lack of
A lot of
innovation,
complaining.
lack of drive in employees and things like that?
Yeah. Oh, things aren't like they were. We can only
Yeah.
fix it by bringing people back in, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Much of that is totally overblown. And in fact, it stems mostly from the fact that the leaders have absolutely no idea how to lead in this new world.
Yeah.
Right? They want to unscramble the egg, mainly because they were more comfortable in the old world. And, let's face it, looking at a bunch of people working away and knowing, in quotes, they're your people,
Yeah.
right? That can feel nice, right? And you don't get that if everybody's spread apart and you're not seeing them and you don't see the fruits of your labor as a leader, right?
Yeah.
So that's a whole part of it, really. It's just like, I don't know how to do this, so it's bad. And it's totally possible to innovate and do work effectively and efficiently in remote or distributed teams.
Sure.
But you're not going to do it just by wanting it to happen, right? You need the training to do it.
Yeah.
Right? And we do teach people how to do this, and it's different, but it can be extremely effective. So there are a bunch of reasons why you might want to bring people back in an office, but those kind of reasons are not the reasons.
Yeah. I think of it sometimes as like the CEO's job is to know what's going on throughout their organization. They don't necessarily have a direct work output other than all of the work output, right? So they kind of do need to be able to have a way to see what's going on and check in and see what's going on. And if they're not like super techie or using current means of doing that, whether it's, productivity boards, Trello boards, Asanas, things like that, where they can actually be virtually engaged, they think they got to be watching people. And I just picture the factory floor, with somebody up in the window looking out at their domain. It's pretty crazy. So, the commute. So let's get into that a little bit more. So if you do drag people back to the office, is that going to help?
Nah. I mean, I guess you can, but you got to remember that your people are not used to doing that now. Right. So in fact, in our day job, right, we're starting to see demand from companies who are bringing employees that used to work in the office and they're now out of the office. They're bringing them back in, and they're finding that the people have lost the skill, right? They don't really know how to work well in office.
Yeah.
And some early in career people have never worked in an office.
Yeah.
Right. And some of those later in career people haven't done it for several years. So people are going to have to get used to that as well.
That's a great point. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it's crazy to think that it's 5 years.
Yeah,
and that is a significant chunk of people's careers spent very differently, and the fact that the working together skill fell off also is probably underappreciated. Wow, that's really fascinating. So practically, what should you do?
Well, if you're an individual, I think you're going to have to think about how you're going to make your work environment the most effective it can be, right? Your environment is what helps you do great work. And that can be at home, that can be at work, can be wherever. The good news, of course, is that it's your work environment if you're working from home. And so you've got a lot of choice that you can do around that. So if it's a room or part of a room, make that awesome. Create routines that help you separate your work from the rest of your home life and give yourself a wind down schedule, things like that.
Yeah.
We got a newsletter on this actually that I just wrote. So if you're following this on Substack, you can see it directly there in the feed. If not, then go grab it. And if you're a company, give your leaders dedicated training on how to manage and lead distributed teams, right? It's different in really, really many ways, and many of those ways are subtle, ways they're not going to learn themselves. So your training basically needs to focus on that.
All right. Fascinating. All right. We did it, Paul.
We did it. All right.
Thanks.
See you next time.
See you next time.